Welcome to Pearson correlation. This video provides an overview of the Pearson correlation, instructions for processing the test run, and guidance on documenting the results. The Pearson correlation, symbolized by R, represents the relationship between two continuous variables. For example, we could ask, is there a correlation between income and happiness? The statistical answer to this correlational question will be answered in the form of the R, which ranges from -1 to +1, wherein the regression sign, plus or minus, indicates the direction of the correlation. Specifically, if the correlation is positive, meaning that the R is between 0 and +1, this indicates that the two variables move in the same direction. When x goes up, y goes up. When x goes down, y goes down. So if our example involving the correlation between income and happiness produced a positive R, this would mean that these variables move in the same direction. When income goes up, happiness goes up. And when income goes down, happiness goes down. This is the nature of positive correlations. The variables move in the same direction. Alternatively, the correlation may be between -1 and 0. This would be a negative correlation. When the correlation is negative, it means that the variables move in opposite directions. When x goes up, y goes down, or when x goes down, y goes up. Returning to our example, if the R was negative, this would mean that overall, higher income would be paired with lower happiness, and lower income would be paired with higher happiness. The regression value, which ranges from -1 to +1, indicates the strength of the correlation. R values that are nearer to minus or +1 are relatively strong, whereas R values nearer to 0 represent weaker correlation. Consider this example wherein the researcher is interested in discovering if there is a correlation between hospital length of stay and the patient's level of depression. In addition to inspecting the numerical results for a Pearson correlation, it's traditional to produce a scatter plot to visualize the relationship between the two variables. The points on the scatter plot represent the two scores gathered from each participant. For example, patient MA4077 has 1 point on the scatter plot. It's here. The position of this point is determined by the patient's length of stay, 8 days on the horizontal axis, and a score of 34 on the depression instrument on the vertical axis. The second patient, ST1701, is represented with this point, a length of stay of 5 days and 19 on the depression instrument. The line running through the cloud of points is the regression line. This is exactly what it appears to be. The regression line is a sort of graphical summary of the points, representing the calculated average pathway through the cloud of points. Consider these scatter plots. In the first example, we see an R of 0.79. Considering this is fairly close to +1, we'd say that this is a fairly strong positive correlation. When it comes to reading the scatter plot, read the graph as you would read a sentence, from left to right. Notice that the positive R produces an upward sloping regression line. In a positive correlation, we see that the variables move in the same direction. Notice that overall, higher homework hours are paired with higher grades, and lower homework hours are paired with lower grades. In this second example, we see an R of -0.79. Since it's close to -1, this too is considered a strong correlation, specifically a strong negative correlation. This negative correlation can be seen in the downward slope of the regression line. When the correlation is negative, we see that the two variables generally move in opposite directions. Here we see that lower alcohol consumption is paired with higher quiz scores, and higher alcohol consumption is paired with lower quiz scores. In the third example, we see an R of 0.03. Since this is close to 0, This would be regarded as a weak positive correlation. Notice that both high and low archery scores are associated with both high and low quiz scores. In other words, the students' bow and arrow skills seem to have no real bearing on their quiz scores, suggesting that there's no significant correlation between archery scores and quiz scores. For this example, suppose we wanted to determine if there's a correlation between length of stay in the hospital and the patient's level of depression. Here are the first 10 records of our survey. In column 1, we record the patient's ID. In column 2, we enter the patient's length of stay, and in the third column, we enter the patient's depression score, derived from the Acme Depression Scale. Begin by running the Excel DIY statistics file. Select the Pearson Regression tab. Then delete the sample data. Highlight columns A, B, and C, and press the Delete key. Next, you can enter the data manually, starting with the patient ID at A1 and the variable names of the two metrics gathered at B1 and C1, followed by the data. Alternatively, you can copy and paste the data into Excel from another source. The documentation template provides guidance in composing thorough and organized results. Describe the study or research question. A researcher wants to determine if there is a correlation between hospital length of stay, LOS, and the patient's level of depression. Describe the sample size, the N. A total of 50 participants were recruited. Describe the correlation, R, and the statistical significance, p-value. This resulted in a statistically significant positive correlation. R equals 0.79, p is less than 0.01. Technically, the p never really goes to 0. In this example, the actual p is quite small, but since we're only displaying the first 4 decimal digits, it appears as 0. In such cases, instead of stating that the p equals 0, it's traditional to document the p result as p is less than 0.01. Finally, describe the implication of the p-value. These results suggest that depression increases as length of stay increases. You may also choose to copy and paste the scatter plot into your results report. If you've written your results as complete sentences, as a final step you can remove the headers and close up the space between sentences. This will render a viable results section. This concludes this video.